All right, guys, so today we're gonna make some sauerkraut and I'm gonna walk you through it step by step so that you can be making this yourself. I'm gonna be sharing the recipes on the membership site in the same module so you can get creative and try whichever one you want. But what I'm showing you today are kind of the basic steps that apply to whichever flavors of sauerkraut you want to create for yourself at home. All right, so we are gonna start with the cabbage, which is the main ingredient for your sauerkraut, obviously. And there's a few ways that you can cut your cabbage. The old school way, you can just have a good knife and slice it really thinly. It's gonna take you a little bit of time, and chances are that even though you are trying to slice it thinly, it can still be quite thick. I prefer to have really thin slices because the thinner the slices, the greater the surface area that the bacteria, the probiotic bacteria, can then feed off of, and it'll just get softer and it'll have a nicer texture when you make it. But keep in mind, I've been making sauerkraut for years, so I've tried it various different ways. Just find a way that you like it. You can, make this various times and just see whatever works best for you. The other option, if you have a grater, you can use this side as well, or even this side of your grater, and you can just grate your cabbage. Actually, I'm seeing this one might not work so well, so it might just be the slices. So you can go ahead and do this. It'll get a little bit messy. Again, not my favorite way of doing it, but if this is the tool that you have, then you can work with that. My favorite is the mandolin. So I really only use this mandolin to make sauerkraut, and this is the only knife that or the only blade that I ever use on it. So it's super simple. You can just kind of go ahead and slice this. You want to have it on the thinnest setting. So for me, I just have it on the first one, and you'll see you'll get a lot of sliced cabbage in a very short amount of time. Do be careful with your fingers. I have had various accidents this way. Red cabbage. Red cabbage is another amazing option. And there's really not much difference in, the final product other than the color. Usually, when it comes to vegetables, when it comes to any food, the more color you have in your food, the richer it is going to be in nutrients. So red cabbage, to be honest, is one, I don't use it a lot for sauerkraut. I think it's just because traditionally it's been made with the white cabbage, but feel free to use the red one. I've actually gone ahead and used a quarter of this for today's batch of sauerkraut. And I love showing you this because you can actually, when you have the red cabbage and you see these white spots on it, that's actually bacteria, and it's the best possible bacteria. This is actually probiotic bacteria that's already living on the vegetable. So it's this bacteria that is going to reproduce inside of our mason jar when we make the sauerkraut. So basically we're just providing the perfect environment for this bacteria to multiply. So it's like you're gonna have a little orgy of bacteria in your sauerkraut mason jar. That's basically what it boils down to. So when you have the sauerkraut, the only other ingredient that you need really now I'm calling this sauerkraut. When you have your cabbage, the only other ingredient that you need to officially make sauerkraut is salt. When you have these two things, this is the most basic form of sauerkraut that you can create. I personally don't love the flavor of just cabbage as sauerkraut, So I like to add a lot of other flavors to make it more enjoyable, because sauerkraut is something that I have with almost every meal. Again, it's something that's really beneficial for your gut flora. It's really helpful for regular digestion. It's really good for your immunity. It's very anti-inflammatory. The benefits go on and on. Keep in mind that sauerkraut is not a meal, it is a condiment. So you really just want to add, 2 to 3, maybe 4 teaspoons of sauerkraut as a garnish to your meals when you're eating them. They're really helpful also when you're having meat. A lot of people have weakened digestive systems. So including myself, it's something that's very common because of the high stress lifestyle that we live nowadays. So sauerkraut is actually really helpful to eat in combination with meat, because sauerkraut is full of enzymes and live bacteria that help you break down the protein, okay? So we have our cabbage. Now I'm gonna show you kind of what that's gonna look like. I'm making a really big batch here, okay? So I have 3/4 of a head of a medium-sized head of white cabbage in here, and half a head of red cabbage. I've already added some salt to this. You gotta just kind of mix that. And then I've added a little bit of carrot. So I'm gonna take you and show you the different flavors that I'm gonna be adding to the sauerkraut today. And I really recommend that you experiment with this a little bit. So I'm gonna be adding carrot. As you see, I already had some in that bowl. I'm gonna be adding onion. Onion is the only one that I'm not gonna be showing you today, because I cry a lot when when I'm exposed to onion, and I have a cut on my finger, so it's gonna be really painful. I love adding onions because it just adds another level of tanginess to the sauerkraut. Also, onions are really antibacterial. So it just adds another layer of, support for your immune system. Now, you might be thinking, okay, onions are antibacterial, but we want bacteria, probiotic bacteria in the sauerkraut. It works together as long as you don't have too much onion, they can, you'll have enough probiotic bacteria in your sauerkraut to make it taste good. The other ingredient that I'm adding today is ginger. So I've added about 4 inches of ginger. And last but not least, for the first time, I'm adding turmeric to my sauerkraut. And I'm gonna show you guys how you can best, grate, the way that what I do is I grate these two, because I don't want to be chopping them. I won't chop them small enough. Ginger is really, really powerful. I don't want to have little chunks of ginger in my sauerkraut, because it's just going to be too much. So the way that I do it is just wash it. Don't peel it. Don't bother peeling it. If you have a grater, the grater will do the peeling for you. Ginger is the one thing I always buy organic, or at least I make sure that it's not from China. Nothing against China, it's a lovely country, but it has been shown over and over that the soil is highly contaminated. So with heavy metals and things that are just not beneficial for us. So we do want to make sure that if you're not going to buy organic ginger, the other option, I think there's a lot of Peruvian ginger or California ginger. So do look out for that. Go that extra mile to get ginger that is not from China. You can very easily just use the finer side of the grater and just grate away. Now what this does is, I'm going to remove the salt here for a second. The skin actually stays on the ginger, or it falls on the outside of the grater. And the meaty part, the part that we're gonna use, is inside, okay? So just use that, and that's gonna be added to the sauerkraut. If you don't have a grater, and just as a fun fact, if you find that you don't use a lot of ginger because you find it's too complicated to peel, which I can only agree with you, use a spoon. Use a spoon, and you can just peel it with the spoon. So it'll just take the top layer of skin off. Super easy. Not a perfect job right now. I haven't taken the time for it, but as you can see, this is the perfect ginger peeler, okay? Now, turmeric, same thing. You use the same end as you do for ginger. With turmeric, if you're gonna use it, even if you're gonna use it when you're cooking, I do recommend that you're cautious if you have a white countertop, because turmeric stains and you can't get rid of those stains. At least I haven't figured out. Probably somebody on the internet has, so you can look it up on YouTube. But you can see like my nails are all yellow, and it's thanks to this beautiful anti-inflammatory root. Same with ginger, it's anti-inflammatory. So by adding these things to our sauerkraut, not only are we adding another layer of flavor to it, but we're adding a lot of really beneficial ingredients to our meals that we might not be consuming otherwise. So it's kind of nice to just, yeah, to be able to add that. Now I'm just gonna wash my hands. Move all this stuff out of the way. Oh, and the carrot, I also just use the grater for that, okay? I find using the knife, it's not thin enough, so the grater is the best thing. Again, it's gonna make your life easier. Onion as well, use the same end of the grater for the onion. If you're sensitive to onions, if they make you cry, you're gonna cry like a baby doing this, because it really bursts open all of the cells in the onion. So hence the reason why I'm not doing it right now. Okay, so I added all of my my shredded cabbage to this really big bowl. This is gonna be about 3 larger sized jars, like 1 liter jars of sauerkraut, okay? Or 2.5, I don't really know, but I'm making sure that I make a really big batch. And what I do is, I always make at least 2 jars of sauerkraut, and I always start making a new batch when I'm done my first jar, okay? That's just me, because I really make sure that I eat this all the time, because our gut health is so important for our overall health, and it is also really important for successful weight loss, because a healthy gut reduces inflammation in the body, and healthy gut bacteria have just shown that, yeah, it's one of those things, you know, like if, I guess that when it boils down to really being really anti-inflammatory, and that being really beneficial for weight loss. So we have our cabbage here. I've added my carrot. The carrot adds a nice sweet flavor to your sauerkraut. Then I'm gonna add all of the ginger. Again, it was about 4 inches of it. You know what? The nice thing about sauerkraut is it's not high maintenance at all. As I mentioned, the main things that you need are your cabbage and your sea salt or Himalayan salt. But from there on, it's really your playground. You can add, if you're not a big ginger fan like I am, but you want to add a little bit because of its health benefits, feel free to add just 1 inch or 2 inches, okay? I would probably even add 5 inches, like I'm going to use this up and make 5 inches out of it. And same with turmeric. Last time I made this recipe, I didn't add turmeric to it. So if you don't have turmeric, don't let that stop you. Just go ahead and do what you want. Leave that out. Same with, you know, if you don't want the onion, another option is you can add garlic to this. I do recommend the carrot because it really helps overpower that cabbage sulfury taste. If that's not your favorite, this really helps. There's other recipes that include apple, other spices, etc., etc. So I'm going to be sharing some of those with you. Anyway, I'm going to be adding the ginger to this. I'm going to add the can see this better. The turmeric, I love all the colors that come together when you make sauerkraut. Okay, so I've added some salt to that already, but because that salt is really, really coarse, I'm gonna be adding some more of this finer Himalayan salt. So what the salt does, the reason why salt is essential in sauerkraut is that it stops it from getting moldy. This is what actually creates the fermentation process. So if you leave a cabbage in your fridge for weeks on end, it's gonna get moldy. The reason why sauerkraut doesn't get moldy is because salt prevents that fungus, the mold, from growing in your food. So that's why salt is one of the oldest preservatives that we know for food. Little fun fact for you there. Now, the other two things that I'm going to be adding to this sauerkraut are oregano and chili flakes. Again, something you can leave out if you want to. If you're not into spicy, I love spicy, so I'm going to be adding a lot of this. And I find that the oregano just gives another nice flavor to it, but oregano is also a really potent antioxidant. So I'm going to be very generous. Again, I'll let you know in the recipe exactly how much you can add. And as you see, I've been doing this kind of sometimes, so I don't really bother with measurements that much. And I've learned with time that you can't really do anything wrong. So sometimes it's a little bit spicier than other times. And yeah, it's just never know what it's gonna be like. So now we're actually blending the salt, and I wish you could see this a little bit better, but you can imagine what this is gonna look like. Just mix it all together. And this is the part where we're gonna be creating the brine. The brine is gonna be the liquid that all of this is gonna sit in. And the brine actually comes from the cells of the vegetable. It's the juices. It's like humans, we also have cell plasma. So basically the brine is the cell plasma of these plants. And the way, here we go, that we create the brine is you have to apply pressure to your veggies. So this is where it gets a little bit physical. And you just have to do this for a few minutes. And you'll see when you do this that it's really helpful to have fresh vegetables, because the longer you have the vegetable in storage, the more dehydrated it becomes and the less brine you actually have, okay? And another little tip that I have to kind of, again, I'm lazy, and if there's a shortcut that I can take anywhere, I'm gonna take it. So let's just say I'm practical rather than lazy. So I don't know if you can see this in the video, but I'm really actually putting my whole body weight on my fist so that I can squeeze these veggies. And here, just to show you the difference, it's lowered, probably reduced by a third already. My other tip for creating brine was to mix the salt in with your veggies, okay? Stir it a little bit, and then just let it sit. Let salt do the work for you. Salt, what it does is it absorbs. And we know, when somebody spills red wine on your carpet or just a piece of fabric, the tip that we always hear is just add salt to it. And it's because salt actually sucks up the liquid into the salt. So what we're doing here by adding the salt and mixing it in with the veggies is the salt is gonna pull out the water from the cell walls. So by mixing it a little bit before, you're just helping break down the cell walls a little bit, and you're making sure that the salt is actually being mixed in really well with the veggies. But what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna cover it and let it sit for about half an hour. You can also do this overnight, just let it sit overnight. I've done that before. Keep it in the oven, keep it in some place where it's not gonna lose too much moisture. I do suggest that you don't let it sit for too long. I've done that, I've gotten really lazy and I was really excited to make my sauerkraut, and then I let it sit with a cloth on top, and then 2 days later I went back to jar it, and by then all the liquid had evaporated. So don't let it sit too long. Don't get too practical here. And as you can see, I don't know, let's give this a test. There's probably some brine. Yeah, see that? That's the brine that we want. And that's gonna help us for the jarring later. And that's the next step. So I'm just gonna put a tea towel over this, and I'll be back soon. So I've only let the sauerkraut sit for 10 minutes, and I looked at it and it actually looks really great, like it's ready to go. You can see the brine is collecting at the bottom and the vegetables look really wet. They're translucent. You can see that the green cabbage is no longer white and tough, but it's kind of, yeah, it's a bit translucent and really, really soft. So that's kind of where you want to get to. And this is another reason why I find it's a lot easier when you have a very thinly sliced vegetable, and that's where the mandolin comes in really handy, because when you use the knife, it can get tougher, and this step will just take so much more effort from your end. So use a mandolin. Hold on, I'm just gonna. Okay, on to the next step. Now that we know that our sauerkraut is ready to go, let's talk jarring. So I highly recommend that you use a wide mouth mason jar. The reason for this is because, let's see, if you use a narrow mouth, it's just so much harder to get the sauerkraut into it. But above all, it's a lot harder to compress the kraut once it's in there. You can always use a tool to help that, but as you can see, even I'm having issues with this spoon. And especially when you're actually letting the kraut ferment on your countertop for about a week or two, it's much more practical to have a wide mouth mason jar because that you can fit a glass into. I'm not gonna skip ahead here, but I'm just gonna let you know for now you're gonna need, or at least I recommend, I've seen that it makes the process so much easier when you have a wide mouth mason jar and a glass that fits into it, because this is actually what's gonna press the kraut down so it is not exposed to air, because if it's exposed to air, that's where it can ferment. Not ferment, sorry, that's what we want, but we don't want it to get moldy. Okay, and you can use any type of glass. I mean, these are my regular drinking glasses, and as long as it fits into the jar, that's what we want. The mason jar does not have to be sterilized. As long as it's clean, good enough. Make sure that there's, no food particles, nothing on the jar. That's all that we need. Other fermentation processes, like for example, when you're making kombucha, you need to sterilize it, but that's why I love sauerkraut. It's very low maintenance, so you don't even need to sterilize these. And you'll need your lids. Of course, this is later to store your kraut. With the lids, you want to make sure that they're not rusty. I see a lot of people using mason jar lids that are super rusty, and you don't want that. Not good for you. Even these guys, they get very rusty. So make sure that when you clean them, you dry them properly and quickly. And if you have rusty mason jar lids, you don't have to go out and buy a new jar. You can just get replacement lids as well, okay? All right, so this is the messy part. I like to use a spoon to fill my jar. This is like my go-to jar because it has no corners, so I just personally find it works best. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna stuff that in here. And I'm not gonna be filling, it probably looks like I'm gonna have enough sauerkraut to make or to fill 2 jars. I won't be filling both of them here with you. I'm just gonna show you how to do one so that you get the idea of how that is done. And I do, so because the brine can collect at the bottom, here I'll show you, at the bottom of, let me do it the other way, hold on. The brine can collect at the bottom of your bowl. You do wanna stir it once in a while to make sure that you get the brine in, mixed in with everything, because the brine is super important for the fermentation process. You don't want dried cabbage and vegetables in your mason jar, okay? So I'm just gonna add a little bit more. You don't wanna fill it all the way to the top because this guy is going to bubble, and if it's too full, it's gonna bubble all over your countertop. So learn from my mistakes so that you don't have to repeat them. Now, it's all just about applying pressure. So so I filled the jar, and it's not even, once you apply the pressure, it's like not even halfway full. So let's add some more to this. Fun fact, maybe not so fun, but fact about mold. Mold can't grow without oxygen. So one of our goals here today is to remove all air bubbles from this kraut so that it is not able to get moldy. And again, it's all pretty easy to do. Sometimes it sounds a little bit complicated. You know what? I thought I was gonna have like 3 jars because I had so much cabbage. But I honestly hardly have anything left here. I won't even have enough to fill half a bigger jar. So there you go. It might look like a lot, but it ends up being nothing. Let me see if I can tilt my camera a little bit here so that you see more of the sauerkraut and less of me. Let's see. So the kraut is in the jar, and then we gotta use our muscles again. So we're gonna be doing, look how beautiful that brine is. So when I said before that you wanna use fresh vegetables or fresh cabbage at least, by that I just mean, you know, I got this at my local grocery store. You just don't want to have it sitting around at home too much. I stored this outside on our balcony for 3 days. Look at that beauty. So that's what you want. You want all of the little bits of veggies to be covered, submerged in the brine. If the vegetables are exposed to oxygen, they can still get moldy. So the brine is what's gonna prevent the mold creation. And as this ferments, you're gonna have new bubbles forming inside. That's basically the bacteria creating, I guess in the fermentation process, there's air created, and it's gonna start accumulating in here. And that's where these guys come in handy. So the glass, what it's gonna do, see how I stirred it, but now at the top I have my cabbage sticking out again. So that's not good. I don't want that to happen. And I also want to continually press out the bubbles that are forming in here. And I found there's many different methods of doing this. Again, I'm super practical. I like to make things as easy as possible. So, and this is another reason why we want the wide mouth mason, is you just want to put that in there and you want to create the pressure. And by keeping the glass, that's going to stay in here now. The glass is going to stay in here, and it's just going to, do this. It's going to keep the brine high so that all the veggies are covered and not exposed to oxygen. And as the bubbles start to form in here, as I leave this out for about a week, probably about a week or 10 days, every day I'm gonna press down on this, because you'll see that the brine is gonna rise. And because of that, I recommend, because the brine is gonna rise, I recommend that when you let this ferment on your countertop, that you put it on a plate so that whatever brine does spill over doesn't go onto maybe your white countertop and stain it if you have turmeric or whatever else you're having. Like, it just avoids the mess. So keep this. Now, if you don't have this much brine, which, trust me, it can happen. It happens to me all the time. You might need to just apply more pressure here. And it helps to add more weight to the glass. So what I do is I just pour water into the glass. You can fill it all the way up, okay? So that's when you want to use a tall glass. If there's not, like if your brine looks like this with the glass in, just add more water and you'll see that it'll elevate it. It doesn't have to be really, really high. Just elevate it as long as everything is covered in the brine. So this is it, and as this starts to ferment, you'll have more brine rising up. You can always just get rid of some of the water in here to reduce the weight of it, and then you just let it sit. So this is it, ladies. This is how you make sauerkraut. This is actually ready to eat now. It's not fermented per se, but it's edible. So if you don't have anything around and you really, really want to have some with your meal because you can't wait to have some of that delicious sauerkraut, then you can go ahead and eat this right away. I wouldn't let it sit on the countertop for longer than 2 weeks. I think even 10 days might be stretching it, depending on the heat. The more heat you have in the environment that you're letting it ferment in, the faster the fermentation process is going to happen. If you let it sit by a window in the wintertime, it's gonna cool down and the fermentation is gonna slow down. And you'll notice it, like you'll really see this thing is alive because it's gonna bubble so much. So keep an eye on that. Feel free to taste test once in a while to see, is this ready to go? It will be fermented after 4 to 5 days. The longer you let it sit out, the more it's gonna ferment, but the benefits are really not, it's not like it's gonna quadruple in the bacteria that it has. So it really is ready to eat in 5 days if it's been in a warm-ish environment all that time. So what you wanna do once the 5 days or once the fermentation period is over, you take this guy out, and this is when you put the lid on. You put the lid on, and once you store this in the fridge and it's exposed to continuous cool temperature, the fermentation process stops. Okay, so then you don't have to worry about the brine covering everything. You don't have to worry about anything else anymore. Just put it back in the fridge and it'll keep there. Should be fine for about a month or 2. Honestly, don't have exact dates. It doesn't last longer than a month for me anyway. So what you do want to make sure when you go and you serve yourself some kraut, make sure that the spoon or the fork that you're using is clean. If you have foreign food particles going into the sauerkraut, again, it's going to get moldy. So we want to keep this free of contaminants, so to speak. It's not very high maintenance, but like any other natural food, it is going to react if there's other, you know, if you're suddenly gonna have like expose it to dairy or some wheat or just, I don't know, anything else, it can go bad. Okay, so put it in the fridge and keep it in there and enjoy.